What's up, coffee converts? In this video, we're gonna be talking about how to hold a teapot, but more specifically, how to pick which hold you should be using for the ergonomics of the pot. So there's 4 different ways to hold these little guys. The first one is the classic pinch grip. You're gonna use your thumb and your middle finger on the handle and put your pointer finger over the top. If there's a hole on the lid button, you wanna make sure that you're not touching that, so you put your finger on the side. The second one is very similar to the way that you would hold a mug, but you're only gonna put your middle finger through the handle, your forefinger on top, and then use your thumb on the lid button to hold it in place. The third one's gonna be the most formal, and that is the two-handed grip. So you'll use your thumb, forefinger, and middle finger on the handle, and then you'll put your pointer finger of your other hand over the top. It's easier for pouring guests this way too. But finally, we have literally just palming it. You put your finger through the handle and then rest the rest of your hand around the top, putting the spout in between your thumb and your pointer finger. Now, 2 of these are pretty practical. 2 of them you're not really ever gonna use, but all of them can be adapted to the ergonomics of the pot. I see people talking about holding a teapot and they're looking for the one best way for every teapot. But the big difference between a gaiwan, which they're all very similar in shape, and a teapot is the teapots themselves have a lot more varied shape and balance points. So it actually makes more sense to change your grip based on the pot, not the other way around. Oh my goodness, this tea is nuts. There is no one right way. I'll tell you which one works most of the time at the end. These pots are both made by Master Huang, so their spouts are similar, their handles are similar, the thinness is similar, and the clay is the same, but they're seated very, very differently. When we're talking about seating, we're looking at the way that the lid is attached to the pots. So on a top-seated pot, you're just gonna have one rim. The lid is going to sit on top of that. Gallery seated pots, on the other hand, the lid actually goes down in, and so it sits flat across the top of the pot. What does this mean for you when you're actually trying to hold the pot? For top seated pots, a lot of them have a rim, and I prefer to grab pots by the rim. Actually, these are my favorite pots, are the ones that you can grab by the rim of the lid, as opposed to by the lid button. But they're not always as pronounced. This is one of my favorite pots, and you can see the exact same thing. I prefer to pick this up by the lid much more than by the lid button. One of my best friends, Mark, is a potter, but he has arthritis. And so this lid button would not work for him because it's so small. But pots that you can pick up from the side like this are always gonna be more comfortable. Alternatively, you could just have a big lid button too. What about when we're actually pouring though? You'll hear a lot of people talk about how the spout, the body, and the handle should all be at the exact same level point. And you can go check out my video on the 9 factors for a perfect teapot to talk about that more. But really, all this does is change the balance. The lower the handle is, the further the pot will drop. The higher the handle is, the less it will drop. For a bigger pot like this one, my first inclination would be to put my middle finger through, forefinger on top, and then go like this for that mug style brewing, right? Now, yes, I could pinch grip it and then put my ring finger underneath, but this just, it feels too big to still even do that. Because the balance is so far, this still is not super comfortable. But some things I see with this pot, it's very thick on the lid all around, on the top and the side, which means I know it's not going to get as hot as the rest of the pot or in other pots where there are smaller, thinner features. What I'm actually gonna do is put my forefinger through and hold it like this. I feel like I could beat somebody with this, I don't know. I mean, this feels very secure. Like I feel in control. I don't feel like you can hear that lid moving. It's not gonna fall though, my finger has it. Oh, by the way, the top knot, as well as every other pot we're using in today's video, if you like them, they are available on our website now. This is one of the most conservative angles. It's at about 45 degrees. So this is gonna have the easiest feel on your hand. I would just go with a pinch grip on this one. You don't even need that finger, it's just there for support. If you wanna do formally, you can, but again, the balance point is already going down, so this feels kind of awkward. And we'll talk about this grip later. The next one that's gonna affect that comfort when you're pouring at different levels is gonna be the size. When we're considering size, there's 2 different things we're considering. 1 is the actual size of the pot, and 2 is the size of the hole in the handle. With these smaller pots, I'm typically gonna go with the traditional hold, the pinch grip, but this is where I like to just kind of touch the edge as well. Some of these lid buttons feel too small and dainty, so you can just put your finger on the edge. And this is one of those cases where I would use the same thing on a bigger pot and a smaller pot. If this is too close and you're gonna burn yourself and you wanna switch to that pinch grip, sometimes it can be a little bit easier just to put your finger on the edge and not all the way to the button. Like this strains my wrist, feels hard. This feels super easy. Every single one of these pots we've looked at so far has one thing in common, and that is the angle that the spout is cut at. Some of these more artistic pots though have a flat cut spout. This is a very intentional decision by the artist, but if you try to pour these like the rest of your pots and just release your wrist all the way, it's gonna chug. So if you ever see a spout that's flat on top, what you need to do is glide into it and then go to full speed. For me, this is one of those perfect examples where if a beginner picked up this pot and you didn't know to use it slightly differently, you might think this is a bad pot, but it is not because of the design of the pot. It's because you have to adjust slightly for the way that the ergonomics fit on this. When you're pouring for other people, you're typically gonna have a pot that's bigger than 100 milliliters. But because your wrist is facing out when you're pouring for somebody else and facing in when you're pouring for yourself, it just feels a little bit different. A lot of times, the pinch grip is the most comfortable when you're pouring for others, but when you're pouring for yourself, like if you really wanted to pour facing yourself as opposed to side, isn't as comfortable. And so even the same pot, I'm gonna hold differently based on if I'm serving somebody else. So if I'm serving somebody else with this, where I would just switch my hand to the mug if I'm pouring for myself. Tuck your finger in, switch your thumb to your forefinger. So if you had to start with just one way, I would start with the traditional pinch grip. It's going to be the most versatile, but just not good in some situations. That fourth and final hold where you put your finger through your pinky and you hold it like this is typically for if the tea has already cooled down. So if you're using green teas, or in I Ching, what they'll do is they'll actually use a pot as a pour cup. So they'll pour into the second pot, and then the second pot you could pick up like that, but it's not super practical other than that. And that tea I was drinking, by the way, is the Sugary Pick-Me-Up from Bitterleaf. It is a blend. It is, let's just say it's interesting, and I can't wait to review it for you guys. Once that comes out, I'll drop that video here, but I gotta go drink more tea.